All right, Isaiah 47. Let's call this one Purpose. Me. Another look at Babylon in this chapter that begins by describing Babylon's decline in the first 4 verses or so. It is going to talk about the ways in which the decline is going to be, I guess, symbolized in a command to sit, because they had been seemingly standing over at least Israel, if not much of the free world, as a ruler. But that time is coming to an end, as he is going to talk about the ways in which the delicate and tender nature that at least symbolized some part of their reputation was not going to be replaced with, in part verse 2, a time when they were going to have to get to work. And beyond getting to work, they were eventually just going to seem to kind of fall off altogether, as verse 5 is going to seem to explain why, going on through roughly verse 7, as it seems to, and this is my paraphrase, describe the way in which they were given a purpose to discipline Israel. However, they began to misuse their purpose or mischaracterize their purpose as an opportunity to just flat out exploit a nation that God never intended to keep in captivity forever. And so, as they began to neglect the part of their authority that was possibly designed to get Israel ready for resettling their own territory and rediscovering their own independence, God was going to replace them with, as we've already seen, Cyrus and a series of leaders in Persia that was going to be fit for that purpose, making sure that Israel was equipped to once again stand on its own. And it looks like Babylon, having lost sight of that purpose, has gotten lost in another purpose, that being me. Thus our title, not meaning me, but themselves. And being preoccupied with themselves, one of their fatal flaws seems to hinge around verse 7 that talks about the ways in which they never thought it was going to end, meaning their reign or their supremacy over not only Israel, but what seems to be at this time historically, most of, as we said, the free world. They didn't think it was ever going to end. God is breaking news to them that in verses 8 and following, that's exactly what is about to happen, because based upon that assumption or presumption that it might not ever end, they're going to make a series of other presumptuous mistakes. Verses 8 and 9 talking about the ways in which there were simply certain types of tragedy that seemed like they were fit for others, but not Babylon. Why? Because in the following verses, 10 and 11, it's going to pick up on a recurring theme, talking about their wisdom, represented in some ways by their enchantments, or what we might call witchcraft, was protecting them or providing them a circle of protection, outside of which tragedy was for other people, but not for them. God is making sure that they understand that whatever protection they thought they had was leaving them blinded to the flaws or the limits of whatever spells or wisdom they thought they had stumbled upon. Verses 12 through roughly, I'm going to guess, 14, maybe even 15, the end of the chapter, talking about the ways in which, on top of their wisdom, they had compounded experience, meaning they weren't stumbling upon new information. This was information that they had for a while that they had put into practice to the point where it was almost second nature. And in addition to their experience in the wisdom that they had acquired, they seemed to have experience in business, quite possibly providing them a level of financial stability in trade that they likewise might have thought was unshakable. The flaw in their security quite possibly being summed up in verse 10, which reads, "You felt secure in your wickedness. You said, 'No one sees me.' Your wisdom and your knowledge led you astray." Reminding me of a relatively simple lesson, that being the way that a fixation on me can ultimately compromise my self-awareness. Understanding the way in which Babylon seemed to have become so fixated on its strengths that it became blind or lacked self-awareness regarding its weaknesses. Understanding that in disregarding God's purpose for them by essentially expanding their role in disciplining Israel into something that looked a lot more like exploitation, they were essentially ruling on borrowed time, repeating almost the exact same mistake that Judah made, noted back in chapter 28, when God noted in verses 14 and 15 that they thought they made a covenant with death that made them immune to consequences. When in verse 15 it says, "Because you have said, we have made a covenant with death and with Sheol. We have an agreement. When the overwhelming whip passes through, it will not come to us." Babylon, essentially making the same mistake as the people they were assigned to discipline and carry off into captivity. Chapter 47, helping us to see in Babylon the way in which the same bad math produced the same bad results. Understanding that Babylon is not only a thing here in the book of Isaiah, we will see Babylon used as an example of that same bad math once again in the Revelation. God, quite possibly in Israel and Babylon, setting forth an eternal principle that whether on an individual or a national level, moving forward without regard to the role that God has for us, especially the role he has for us in the lives of others, is a great way to produce disappointment.